Welcome to Pensare Basketball. My name is Robert, and today we're going to be talking about Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. The Toronto Raptors backcourt is one of the most hotly debated topics among Raptor fans. We're going to talk about whether these guys are overrated, underrated. Am I right? Am I wrong for being so critical of them? And are they a part of the Raptors core going forward? If you're new around here, grab some coffee. Let's get to it. So first, let's talk about Fred VanVleet. Do I think Fred is a point guard? I do not. I have been on the record saying that he's basically a shorter Klay Thompson for the last 3 years. And while he was playing off the ball with Kyle Lowry and splitting those point guard duties, I think a lot of this still worked to some degree, even though I didn't love that backcourt. But I think when you take Kyle out of the equation and you hand the ball directly to Fred VanVleet and just say, okay, go and create the offense for us, go manage the game for us, I think a lot of the weaknesses start to show. And I don't think these are necessarily all weaknesses that you can improve on. So for me, an ideal point guard in the NBA brings 4 competitive advantages. Number 1, mismatch generation. An ideal point guard is, at least for some players, or if not most players, a mismatch on offense. They can do this through a multitude of ways. They can do it through strength like Luka Doncic. They can do it through quickness and burst and athleticism and downhill gravity like Ja Morant or Derrick Rose in his prime, but they have to be able to do it in some way. Number 2, game management. Do they understand time and score? Do they understand how to hunt for their offense? Who's hot? Hey, this guy hasn't touched the ball in like 4 or 5 possessions. Let me get him a touch here. Do they know when to time risks? Is there a pass? Maybe sometimes that's a little bit risky, but the payoff of that pass would just be so huge. Do they make these internal calculations automatically? Do they have a sixth sense for that? I think John Stockton had a sixth sense for that. I think Magic Johnson, Gary Payton, those guys really knew on how to do that. Number 3, creation. Do you create well for others? Do you create well for yourself? I don't necessarily think Fred VanVleet creates well for either himself or others. I see a lot of contested shots. Yes, he's good at hitting them, but contested shots are definitely not ideal if you're not hitting at an elite clip, and he's not hitting at an elite clip overall. His shooting percentages consistently over the last 4 or 5 years have been below league average. His true shooting has been below league average for many years. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a recipe for success when you get into deep playoff runs. There's going to be a lot of 4 for 21, 4 for 22 nights, and not a lot of 10 for 18, 10 for 17 nights. The 4th thing that I think every great point guard should have is unselfishness. Are they naturally giving? Now, this is a little bit debatable because there have been some very good point guards in the NBA that have been prone to hunting their own offense. But when you really start to hone in on the greatest point guards to ever do it, be it Magic Johnson, John Stockton, you can go down the list, Jason Kidd, there is a natural feeling that even though they can score, they tend to score a little less than they could score because they're always looking to set others up. They make other people better. Now let's talk about the defensive end. I think that Fred VanVleet draws a lot of criticism on defense, and most of it is unwarranted. Okay, he's a very good team defender. He's a great on-ball defender. He's pesky. He's disruptive. He does so many things really well. Also, happens to be really smart. Whatever Fred VanVleet could milk out of his 6'2" wingspan body, he has done. Okay, I would like him to get into better shape, of course. But apart from that, there isn't a lot more that you can expect someone of his size to do. But let's talk about the size, because it is important. Last year in the 2022 NBA draft, well this year, we had Ty Washington slip all the way to 29th. Small guards, Kennedy Chandler, just slipped. Why? Because teams are going for taller ball handlers. They're going for Ousmane Dieng in the lottery. They're going for Josh Giddey, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs. Not one player that I just mentioned is shorter than 6'4". Markelle Fultz, 6'3", long wingspan. Even Donovan Mitchell, who's 6'1", 6'10" wingspan. Teams are going for these long, rangy, taller ball handlers. Why? Even Scottie Barnes is a point guard, just so you know. They're going for these guys because they understand that they have a competitive advantage when it comes to seeing over the defense. Magic could just clearly see over most of the guys who were guarding him. This is talked about a lot when it comes to the theory of guarding the inbounder. Andre Iguodala was on record recently saying that he always believes in guarding the inbounder, whereas a lot of coaches believe that maybe it's useless It's not useless because gaps in the offense open up for milliseconds. Yes, a lot of it is read and react, court vision, etc., but you can't see what you can't see. And if you have a guy who's 6 feet tall, no matter how tenaciously he's guarding you, there's a vertical limit to how much resistance he can offer to the eye line of the guy who he's facing. So when Cade Cunningham plays against Fred VanVleet, even if Fred VanVleet, in theory and by the analytics, is a better defender than Scottie Barnes or Chris Boucher, there are certain things that Cade Cunningham going up against Fred VanVleet is going to see that he wouldn't see against a longer defender. And I do think that's important. I also think this becomes uber important when it comes to switching, because if Fred VanVleet gets caught in the post, it's lights out. That's just not the case for a taller guard like Cade. I think Cade can offer, with his 6'6", 7-foot wingspan, I think he can offer a lot of resistance. In an ideal world, every player on your team should be taller than 6'4". I'm just putting it out there. I understand that it won't always be that way. There will always be some elite talent who's 6'2", 6'1", Darius Garland, whatever. But that guy is going to be at a disadvantage at some point, and it's going to get hunted in the playoffs. Look, the Raptors, they have a choice to make here. And there's a lot of good with Fred VanVleet. A lot. I think a lot of the criticism is probably overstated, a little unwarranted. But I also think a lot of the praise is unwarranted. So that's where I stand on Fred. What about Gary Trent? I read a quote the other day from a tweet that he put out where he said that he was really surprised that he did not get an all-defensive vote. And I went on Raptors Digest and I had a hot take. I said Gary Trent Jr. was the worst defender on the Raptors last year. While I wish I could take that back to some extent, because what I meant to say was that he was the worst defender among players who actually played minutes, I think the general point that I was making stands. Okay, now a lot of people are going to look at the steals and deflections, and I understand why being 6th or 7th in steals, leading the league in deflections for a large part of the season, I understand why that alone makes you think that a guy is really good at defense. So just like with Fred, let's talk about a few things that make someone a really good wing defender. Number 1, switchability. Especially in a league which is running pick and roll at the rate that the NBA is running it. Very often a wing is going to get switched onto a very quick guard or a very big post player or a big man rolling to the basket. And having wings, a wing like Saddiq Bey, a wing like Mikal Bridges, a wing like Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby, having wings who have that ability to at least offer some resistance, that you're not just clearly giving up a blow by or just clearly giving up an easy touch inside. That's a huge advantage. And by the way, if I could swap all of Gary's deflections and steals to just give him a 30% boost on his ability to guard at the rim, I think he would immediately be a better defender. But he has never shown that. I also think rebounding. He's a first percentile defensive rebounder. Now you might say, well, who cares? He's a guard. We're talking about rebounding with guards. Yes, we are. We are talking about rebounding with guards because last I checked, defensive rebounding is a part of defense. It's closing the possession. But too often, Gary Trent is to half court by the time a defensive possession ends because he gambled for a steal. The gambling doesn't bother me. A lot of that is scheme related. The Raptors understand his strengths and weaknesses as a defender. To the people who think that he's not a very good defender and maybe the worst defender ever, I do want to caution that back a bit because there are some things that he does very well. Being disruptive on defense is a very positive trait. It makes ball handlers uncomfortable, much like what I just said about Fred VanVleet. The tenacity with which you approach defense, poking the ball away, deflecting the ball, it starts to make offensive players uncomfortable. And I do think that for most players, Gary Trent is an uncomfortable matchup. I think he tries hard for the most part. I think he's extremely pesky. He gets up into ball handlers, but very often he just gives clear blow-bys. Defenders like this need two things in order to be very successful. Number 1, they need to be extremely capable of recovering, which Gary is not. Michael Jordan was an extremely aggressive defender, extremely disruptive, but he also had the athleticism, the tenacity, the will, and the intelligence to be able to recover. He could poke at a steal, have it go badly, and within 5 steps, be right back with the defender. Gary can't really do that, or at least he hasn't shown the ability to do that. It's either he goes for the home run or he's out of the play and he's gone. This may be motor, this may be scheme, this may be athleticism, but at the end of the day, if a guy steals the ball 2 times a game and gives up 6 clear runs to the rim for the 6 times he gambles and it doesn't work out, to me, that's a guy who's killing you on defense, okay? And there's a reason why Crafted has him as a 27th percentile defender. It's because he's just not very good at all the other things that make you a good defender. The second thing that you need to have with disruptive defenders to offset some of the gambling is a rim protector. If Gary Trent Jr. played with Rudy Gobert, he actually would be so much better. Because he doesn't have the problem that Donovan Mitchell has, which is that he's not trying. He's trying really, really hard. He just gets burned a lot. And having someone back there who can clean up your mistakes allows you to be aggressive. So, Gary Trent Jr., welcome to Christian Koloko time. So if Christian Koloko and Precious Achiuwa can take a step up in place of Khem Birch, if Scottie Barnes can become a better rim protector, if OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, if they can do it by committee even, but especially if Christian Koloko can pop in the next 2 years at some point, I really do think that those two are a very good defensive pairing because they offset a lot of each other's weaknesses. That's the defense side of Gary Trent Jr. On offense, I really understand the value of having him. I understand the value of having someone who can close out quarters, who can get his shot off. I just don't like the shots that he generates. I don't like his passing. I don't like his percentages, even though I will agree that he shot very well from 3 last year. His shot diet will catch up with him. And I've had a long history of not liking guys who have bad shot diets. I like guys who get open shots. I like guys who get in rhythm shots. I do not like guys who disrupt rhythm to find their own rhythm, who disrupt teammates to find their own offense. That to me bothers me. And I think that if you really look at the philosophy of basketball, maybe Precious Achiuwa's had 2 positive possessions in a row and he's really heating up, or Scottie Barnes just hit a last 3 and he's cutting to the basket, and instead of making the right pass he just says up Gary Trent time and he takes a shot, and that shot either misses clear or clanks off the back of the rim. That has an impact on team chemistry within the game. There's a deflation of I don't think the analytics properly, at least where we're at analytically, capture the effect of guys who just consistently miss open opportunities. But when you really go back and study the game film with Gary, you see how often he just misses the obvious pass. Look, he does 2 things extremely well. He scores, not at an elite efficiency, but at least at an elite rate, and he deflects and steals the ball. He is the definition of a role player. He is also 23 years old, and I'm aware of this. Fred VanVleet is 28. I am aware of this. I know that these guys are not in their late 30s, that their career has not wrapped. They can still get better. I just think that the Raptors may have to choose between one of these guys because they both seem to be having very similar issues on offense and defense, which is that they're incomplete and not very versatile on defense and somewhat selfish and limited in their creativity on offense. And when you put them both together, I think that's when you run into issues. So this has been a fun little rant on Gary and Fred. I actually do think that they're both fairly paid. I think they're both fairly valuable. I think they have a place in this league. I just don't like seeing how often they run the offense together. Maybe I just don't like how they're structured within the offense. I would really like to see Scottie and Pascal get the ball more. And honestly, if I'm picking who the third option on this team should be, my pick would be OG. And I think a lot of Raptor fans out there probably disagree with that right now. But I just think that Pascal, OG, and Scottie create advantages and mismatches at a rate that collapses the defense better than Gary and Fred do. So let me know in the comments below. I'm being too hard on Fred and Gary. This video is probably going to get like 1,000 dislikes. If you're interested in seeing a debate on Gary and Fred, please check out Raptors Digest, the last video that I did with them about Gary coming off the bench potentially, which I think would solve a lot of problems. If you've been watching these Rico Hines runs, you know that OG and Scottie look amazing in these runs. It's unbelievable. OG looks so fluid, so athletic. Haven't seen him look like this since college, prior to that big injury, the ACL injury that he had. And Scottie just looks like a man among boys. He's just bullying guys. The way he pushed Montrezl Harrell out of the way, it was like a child. Like, I can't believe this guy just turned 21. Honestly, I wish opening night was tomorrow. We still have a little time left, so hopefully these videos and, you know, Pensare basketball content is keeping you engaged in the off season. We are growing. It feels like yesterday I was talking about, oh my God, we're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and now we're, I don't know, 300 away from 2,000 subscribers. So that's awesome. So if you agree with this, don't agree with it, let me know in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe, hit notifications. It really does help the algorithm, and I'll see you next time.
Do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it!